Have you ever told yourself, I'm just not strong enough? Like no matter how hard you try, something inside always pulls you back? What if I told you you're not weak at all? What's really happening is that your mind is running the show without your permission. And the wildest part? Most of us don't even realize it. Not until that invisible script has already convinced us we're broken, stuck, or not enough. Let me tell you a story. There was a time in my life when I woke up already exhausted. Not physically, mentally, like the fight was lost before I even got out of bed. My mind was loud, narrating everything I wasn't, every mistake I'd made, every dream I was too afraid to chase. It didn't feel like overthinking. It felt like drowning in thoughts that wore my face. That's when I realized I wasn't the one thinking. I was just listening. This video isn't about motivation. It's about mental strength, self-awareness, and waking up to how your own mind convinces you that you're powerless. It's about taking the wheel back, reclaiming your inner power and breaking through the psychological barriers that keep you stuck in loops you didn't even choose. We're going to walk through 7 powerful realizations that helped me break free from those loops, the same ones that keep most people trapped for life. No fluff, no cliches, just real talk, mindset shifts, and perspective changes that lead to personal growth, self-discipline, and real transformation. You ever notice how there's this voice that never shuts up in your head? Like a radio station on loop, playing commentary 24/7. Most people live their whole lives tuned into that same station, never questioning who's behind the mic. I used to believe that voice was me, sounded like me. It used my fears, my doubts, my past. But the day I caught it lying, I realized something that changed my life. That voice wasn't telling the truth. It was echoing my fear, not my reality. I remember walking into a meeting and hearing it whisper, "You're not ready. You're going to mess this up." But there was no evidence of that. I had done the work, I had the skills. Still, I let it control me. That was the moment I understood the difference between self-awareness and mind control. That voice was built from years of conditioning, from limiting beliefs, from psychological barriers I didn't even know existed. It was fear in disguise, and I was narrating my entire life from that script. The brain, when left unchecked, becomes an unreliable narrator. It recycles old thought patterns, repeating the same mental loops, all while convincing you it's just how you are. But self-awareness is the first step to breaking free. When you become the observer, not the puppet, you gain mental clarity. That's when real personal growth begins. Because you can't master a mind you haven't taken the time to study. Here's a simple practice. Next time you hear that voice, pause. Don't react. Ask yourself, is this a fact or is this fear? Write the thought down. Challenge it like a lawyer would cross-examine a witness. Over time, you'll build the mental strength to separate the noise from your truth. That's the start of self-mastery. And no, it's not easy, but damn, it's worth it. Because once you realize you've been living with a false narrator, you start to question the whole story. And that's when you begin to see the bars of the cage you thought was comfort. A comfort zone feels warm, familiar, even luxurious. But here's the hard truth. It's a beautiful prison. You get routine, predictability, a false sense of safety. But what you trade for that is inner power, personal growth, and your real potential. I stayed in a dream job for years. Not because I loved it, but because it felt safe. Deep down, I knew it wasn't aligned. But I convinced myself it was good enough. It's like living in a 5-star hotel where you've lost the key to the door. You get fed, you're taken care of, but you can't leave. I had all the outer markers of success, but inside, I was shrinking. Every day, I didn't act on my truth. I gave my self-discipline away. The fear of the unknown held me hostage. But overcoming fear means understanding that your mind will always choose familiarity over freedom, unless you reprogram it. Want to test it? Think of something you've always wanted, a project, a move, a bold decision. Now notice what shows up. Doubt? Anxiety? That's your comfort zone pulling the strings through psychological barriers. Try this. Make one decision today that feels uncomfortable but necessary. One call, one conversation, one step. Watch how your emotional resilience expands when you choose courage over comfort. What nobody tells you is that self-improvement doesn't come from massive leaps. It comes from breaking routine, daily. It's a mindset shift from safety to strength. You're not supposed to feel ready. You're supposed to feel challenged. That's how mental strength is built. The goal isn't to feel good all the time. The goal is to become someone who can handle anything. Because right on the edge of that comfort zone, that's where the real you is waiting. And if you pay attention, your brain will start showing you something even deeper. Something about the way it's actually wired to keep you small. Your brain doesn't care if you're happy. It cares if you're alive. That's its job. From a survival standpoint, new means threat. And that's why chasing your dreams feels like walking into fire. It's not weakness, it's wiring. But here's the problem. If you don't understand this, you'll keep mistaking discomfort for danger. You'll self-sabotage and call it intuition. You'll avoid change and call it self-care. I remember turning down an incredible opportunity, high growth, aligned with my passion. But something in me panicked. My brain screamed, "This is risky. What if you fail?" I didn't realize that was just an outdated system trying to keep me in check. That wasn't self-awareness, it was mind control. It's wild how we call it being realistic, when in truth, it's just our brain trying to keep things familiar. Here's the practice. Start labeling your thoughts. Literally. When a voice says, "This could go wrong," tag it, "brain seeking safety." When it whispers, "Stay where it's comfortable," tag it, "fear of the unknown." This gives you mental clarity. It creates a buffer between you and the programming. And over time, this builds self-mastery. Because you're no longer reacting, you're choosing. We're so conditioned to chase comfort that we forget it costs us our growth. True empowerment is built in moments when you walk toward what scares you. Not because the fear disappears, but because you stopped letting it drive. This is how you break limiting beliefs. It's not about shutting the fear off. It's about turning the volume down and turning your inner power up. And when you start catching those fear-based scripts mid-sentence, you begin to uncover an even deeper voice. One that's been buried under years of shame pretending to be truth. Shame's sneaky. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It slips in like a shadow, disguising itself as truth. And before you know it, you're not just feeling bad about what you did, you're feeling bad about who you are. That's the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, "I made a mistake." Shame says, "I am the mistake." And when you believe that lie long enough, it becomes your identity. I once labeled myself lazy during a burnout season. I wasn't unmotivated, I was drowning in inner conflict. I didn't lack ambition, I lacked support. But shame convinced me that the problem was me. That's what it does. It keeps you stuck, looping in limiting beliefs, killing your self-awareness before it even has a chance to grow. That internal narrative isn't yours. It's borrowed, passed down, imposed. Here's what helps. Radical truth-telling. Not about the world, about yourself. Ask, what am I accusing myself of that might not be true? Write it down. Sit with it. This level of mental clarity is uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. Shame thrives in silence. Speak it and it loses power. You're not broken, you're just believing something that was never yours to carry. We've been taught to internalize pain instead of process it. But healing doesn't happen in hiding. When you expose the lie, you create space for self-improvement, motivation, and even joy. This is the foundation of emotional resilience. Not ignoring your wounds, but knowing they aren't your identity. That's the beginning of empowerment. And once you realize how many of your traits were born out of survival, not essence, you start to question everything you thought was just your personality. You ever notice how we call certain behaviors just the way I am? That's the trick. Repeated patterns start to feel like identity, but they're not. They're just habits of thought and behavior you never questioned. It's like wearing the same outfit every day because someone once told you it looked good. After a while, you forget there were other options. That's how thought patterns quietly become prisons. I used to say I was just not good with confrontation. Truth? I had learned to avoid conflict to stay safe. That wasn't my personality, that was a defense mechanism. A product of limiting beliefs, not a reflection of my true self. And once I realized that, I couldn't unsee it. My so-called traits were actually survival strategies. That kind of self-awareness is uncomfortable, but it's also the start of breaking free. Try this. Write down 3 things you believe are just how you are. Then ask yourself, where did I learn this? Who benefits from me staying this way? Suddenly, your inner power comes online. You start seeing which patterns were formed by fear, not freedom. This is mental strength. This is the path to self-mastery. The key here is curiosity without judgment. Don't shame yourself for these patterns. They kept you alive. But now, they might be keeping you small. Changing them doesn't mean changing who you are. It means becoming who you actually were before the world told you who to be. That's what self-improvement is all about. And just when you think you've figured it all out, life hands you a familiar situation wrapped in a new lesson, revealing that growth doesn't happen in a straight line. Healing isn't some straight highway where every mile feels better than the last. Nah, it's more like a spiral staircase. You loop back around to the same wounds, the same triggers, but from a different height. And that can feel like failure if you're expecting a finish line. I've had so many I thought I was over this moments, but those moments weren't setbacks. They were deeper layers being revealed. There was a time I thought I had fully let go of my fear of rejection. Then one conversation, one tiny comment triggered a storm. I spiraled. At first, I judged myself, but then I realized I wasn't in the same place. I saw the reaction. I had the self-awareness to name it. That alone was growth. Because real emotional resilience isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise each time with more clarity. Here's something you can practice. The next time an old wound resurfaces, ask yourself, what am I seeing now that I couldn't before? That's the wisdom. That's personal growth. It's not a loop, it's a spiral. You're evolving in layers. You're building mental strength through each revisit, not losing it. It's like polishing a stone. Every pass removes a little more of what isn't you. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. And when you show up for yourself again and again, even when it hurts, that's self-discipline. That's empowerment. Healing requires patience, compassion, and a whole lot of trust. Because every layer you uncover is a step closer to inner power. And once you realize how much of your healing depends on how you handle your thoughts in real time, you start to wonder what would happen if, instead of reacting, you simply watched. Most people think power is about control, but real power? It's awareness. The moment you start observing your thoughts instead of automatically believing them, the game changes. I remember the first time I did it. A thought popped up, something harsh and familiar. But instead of reacting, I paused. I watched it float by, like a cloud. That single moment of stillness cracked open something huge. Self-mastery. That pause? That was mental clarity in action. It's what allows you to respond instead of react. To choose your mindset instead of being dragged around by it. I started to notice how many of my decisions weren't based on truth, but on limiting beliefs, shame, or fear. That space between stimulus and response became the doorway to inner power. And once that door's open, everything shifts. Try this. Pick a moment today, a trigger, an irritation, a negative loop, and just sit with it for 60 seconds. Don't act. Don't justify. Just observe. It's gonna feel weird at first, maybe even uncomfortable. That's your old wiring resisting. But if you do this consistently, your mindset shift will come fast. Suddenly, you're not just reacting to life, you're shaping it. That's where motivation comes from. Not from forcing change, but from finally seeing the truth about your patterns. You realize you're not broken, you were just unaware. And when you wake up, you reclaim your choices. That's empowerment. That's self-discipline. That's the beginning of a life led by consciousness, not conditioning. And once you tap into this awareness, you'll never be able to unsee how much of your life was being run on autopilot. You're not weak, you're human, and you've been surviving with a mind trained to keep you small. Not because it hates you, but because it thinks it's protecting you. That's what it was built for. Safety over growth, familiarity over freedom. But now you know. You've seen how limiting beliefs, inner conflict, and old thought patterns can shape a reality that doesn't reflect your true self. And the truth? You were never the problem. You were just living under someone else's script. So let me ask you this. What if the only thing standing between you and the life you want is realizing you were never broken to begin with? That's not just comforting, that's powerful. Because once you start believing that self-mastery, motivation, and empowerment aren't just ideas, they're yours to claim. If this hit home for you, if even one sentence made you pause and feel something real, don't keep this to yourself. Subscribe, because this channel is where we dismantle the myths we've been taught about our minds. Together, this is a space for truth, personal growth, and rewiring the patterns that kept us stuck. And if you're ready to go deeper, really peel back the layers, then watch this next. How your childhood still controls your adult decisions, and how to break free. That video opened my eyes to patterns I didn't even realize were shaping every choice I made. I promise it's not just informative, it's transformational.